master the waves of medical device product development? Well, wax up your surfboard because you are listening to Inspired by Amua. And here is your medical device product development expert, that Hawaiian-hearted hostess who will help you hang 10, Meghan Alonso.
And aloha! You're listening to Inspired by Amua, where we help you master the waves of medical product development. Each week, we interview guests that educate, guide, and inspire to give you and your product the skills you need to hang 10. If this is your first time listening, Amua is spelled I-M-U-A, and it's a Hawaiian word. It means to advance forward with passion despite rough waves. There are plenty of those in medical device development, but keep listening because we've got you covered. I wanted to bring up a fact that I'm launching a beta program this fall, and it's ideal for those of you that have that idea that you haven't acted on, that next big thing, that next potential product that could really change the face of healthcare. But maybe you're bogged down, you're working a full-time job, or you're just not sure about it, or you're a postdoc in a lab and you're really familiar with grants, but you don't know the commercialization system at all. Well, I've got this program that you can sign up for. I've got 10 free spots since it's a beta program. All I ask in exchange is for feedback. And when I launch the program for real next spring, you'll get it at no cost. So to sign up for that, stay in touch with the updates. Go to amua-services.com/IIPP. That's IIPP. Or you can text the word invention to the number 44222. So my guest today is an advisor and strategist, and he specializes in medical products. So he helps startups out with that process. And please help me welcome Andy Cothrel. Andy, are you ready to hang 10?
Absolutely.
All right. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you started working in the medical device industry.
Yeah, so I actually didn't start out intending to work in medical device and medical products. I was an alternative energy guy by training, by graduate and undergraduate degrees, actually, both focused. So I was sort of a save the world guy, but I was coming at it from an energy and environmental perspective. But the brief time I spent 2 or 3 years in that industry happened to coincide with a couple of events. One was the price of oil dropped like a rock. And the second was the Valdez crashed in Prince William Sound. And so it wasn't a really happy time to be in the energy business. And at that point, made the decision to switch over into healthcare and have never looked back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so many of us that end up here and we never see ourselves ending up here, but it just kind of calls our name or it finds us.
Absolutely, and it is a very gratifying field, and so I think I don't hear about too many people that switch out. I hear a lot more of folks who are attracted in. So
yeah. So how do you get involved with startups when you work with them?
It really, of course, is situational, but I can say there's kind of 3 broad categories where I get involved with startups. One is in a governance role. The second, and probably the most common, is in an advisory role. And then the third, which happens from time to time, is I will actually take on an operating executive role in the startup, like a CEO or COO type role. So
with that, and some people don't think they need it right off the bat. Others recognize the fact, hey, this would be really helpful. So to those people that are kind of doubting, hey, I can do this. What would be some points to strengthen the case for, hey, this would be really advantageous for you to do?
Sure. I think the biggest, and it harkens back to a little bit to that famous Donald Rumsfeld quote about known unknowns and unknown unknowns, right? You don't know what you don't know. What's really interesting is when you work in industry in particular, if you work at one of the larger companies, a Medtronic or an Abbott, you learn a lot, but you still only learn a fraction of what you need to bring a startup all the way through to fruition.
Yeah.
And so while you end up very well versed in one or more segments of the business, you don't see the whole picture, and that can harm a startup's prospects. The same thing coming out of academia or other situations. So really, unless you've done a startup kind of front to back before, there are going to be landmines that go off, and you may be fine and survive and make it across the finish line, or maybe not. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the stats, the maybe nots tend to dominate, and so it's I think a prudent move to assemble a strong group of advisors and people that maybe have a little more scar tissue to help you avoid and learn from their pain instead of your own pain.
Yeah, that's good. So I know you work a lot with startups, and I want to focus on today about making a plan to exit. So it's one thing to build up a company, but at some point, it's wise to have an exit strategy, whether it even before it hits the market, or letting it go to market and then exiting. So tell us a lot about that. Maybe we'll start with when a company is still in that startup phase and they're very early on, what they can be thinking of as they're preparing for this.
That's a great question. And I'd start by referring back to an author that was very, very big in the 90s, a fellow named Stephen Covey, who wrote a book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yep, it's a great book.
It is a great book. And one of his habits was begin with the end in mind. And nowhere is that more applicable than in a startup. And so how you operationalize that, right? How you turn that into actual influence on choices and strategies. And so you have to try to put yourself in the shoes, right, of that acquirer. And if you have experience on the buy side in places like I had the good fortune both at Abbott and at Roche of being able to be involved in some of that buy side action and due diligence and post acquisition integration kinds of things. And so you start to learn, what's helpful and what's really not helpful. And there are things you can do in terms of the capital structure of the company and a clean cap table, the intellectual property position of the company, the international footprint of your patent portfolio. These are all trade-off decisions, right? If you had an unlimited budget, it would be easy to optimize yourself for exit, right? But it's a lot harder on a limited budget, and it's easy to make mistakes. I recall one startup in particular that made a really, really interesting and rather fundamental discovery about the immune system. And they had friends that worked at a major drug company, and they went to their friends and said, "Where would you patent this?" And of course, they said, "Everywhere, of course. This is very significant." And so this startup was paying for Portuguese translations to process patents in Brazil and Japan and India and China. I mean, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars. And at the end of the day, they weren't even sure yet what the science was good for. And it was just a little bit of the cart before the horse. So you can overdo trying to prepare for exit. So there's a little bit of a sweet spot. Probably some of the biggest things to think about in terms of that positioning for exit are, what do they need, right?
Uh-huh.
And what I mean by that is if you think about their portfolio, everybody's product portfolio has holes in it. Nobody offers everything to everybody, right? Whether that's in molecular diagnostics or next generation sequencing or diabetes care, it doesn't really matter. Nobody has everything. And so if your product doesn't plug a hole for somebody, then what does it do?
Yeah. It's funny that you bring this up because it's not out yet. I'll have to go back and reference it later on when I edit this episode. So I just did a YouTube video about intellectual property mistakes that people make. And one of them is just patenting and securing IP way too early, like in that situation, because you need to validate it first, and you need to find that market need before you do that. And also, as in product development, as you're developing that product, the patents around your technology are going to change. So you don't want to wait forever, but you want to wait till you have something that you're really positive that you're going to move forward with.
Absolutely. And, if you think of it in the context of things like the startup owner's manual and such, you're looking for product market fit. And in this case, you're looking for product acquirer fit, right? Your market is the acquirer. And so how does that fit with them? Is it some key IP they need? Are you selling to a customer segment that they can't currently reach? Are you selling to a geography they don't currently cover? How are you going to create incremental revenue for that acquirer? Because that's what they want. And that kind of leads me into the second big lesson for positioning for exit. And that is, nobody wants to buy a project anymore. There was a day, right? And I'm old enough to remember that day, unfortunately, when people would buy projects, right? They would buy patents, and then they would invest a lot of their own time and effort. Those days are largely behind us, and the last vestiges of those days were squeezed out in the Great Recession in 2009 and 2010. Companies want to buy revenue. They want to buy customers. They want to buy business solutions. They don't want to buy projects. Mm-hmm. And so as you're positioning for exit, it's important to remember that and to make sure that your product performance is buttoned up, that not just the product, but how you support your customers. The whole value package needs to be thought through, because the easier it is to bolt your business onto their business, the higher the price and the more potential acquirers you're going to create with your startup.
So are you saying you don't see a lot of, because I've seen it sometimes where even still pre-revenue, as long as they've really fleshed out the idea and they're very mature in product development, then they can get acquired.
I think that's true in some of the cutting edge technologies.
Okay.
I mean, if you have something that's really novel, and you've got good IP positions in it, then I think a pre-revenue exit is still possible, but it's becoming more the exception rather than the rule, particularly as I guess the playing field starts to level a little bit more technologically, and there's more than one way to arrive at a sort of a market outcome. Mm-hmm. I think about some of the oncology panels and next generation diagnostics, and there are just pick one. I'll pick prostate cancer. There's probably thousands and thousands, maybe millions or even billions of individual biomarker combinations one can assemble into a panel, right? So having a panel is, no big deal, right?
Yeah.
It's like having a nose. Everyone has one. It's not very exciting. And the patent landscape, thanks to Prometheus and a few other USPTO decisions, that's not as important. So what is important? Really strong clinical data, good reimbursement coverage decisions, some proven traction, some ability to attract and keep customers. Those are the things that get a potential acquirer more excited today. And that's maybe a little bit different than it was 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just goes to show you that, to be in this industry, you really need to think long and hard about, if this is your baby, you've got to be committed to it, and you've got to see that through. It's not something that you can turn and burn quickly.
It is. It takes that persistence, and part of that, going back to the product market fit concept, right? Part of positioning yourself for exit is, of course, positioning yourself for customers. But particularly when you're thinking about exit, if you have exit targets in mind, who are the customers they love? Who are the customers they respect? Who are the customers they listen to? Go get those customers. I know a fellow in the orthopedics industry who's an absolute master at this, and as a result will have a very successful orthopedic exit pretty shortly. He basically had a system. It was designed for extremities, and he looked at who the players were and what their gaps were, and said, okay, they're selling a lot of non-extremity stuff to these dozen physicians here. These dozen physicians are about 40% of their business. I'm going to go get those dozen physicians to use my extremity package. And lo and behold, guess who the number one suitor is, right, for this orthopedic company? It's that company that uses those physicians. You can, the strategies aren't always that straightforward, but if you try to incorporate that into your clinical testing strategies, your beta testing strategies, as you go after your first adopters, and try to include some of those folks in the fold, it can really make a world of difference in terms of credibility with the acquirers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. So what about, no, I mean, that is kind of an example of where I'm going, but if someone has been down this path for a while, they're not just starting out anymore. They have a lot of funding. They're deep into product development. So what can they be thinking about as far as exiting? If they didn't think about it when they first started out, what can they be thinking about now? I guess I kind of relate it to, there's those people that start saving and planning for retirement in their 20s versus the people that start saving in their late 30s, early 40s.
Yes. Yeah. And in the same principle, you're going to have to work harder now.
Yeah.
and maybe work a little longer, right? You may have to take your company a little bit further than you otherwise would have had to in order to position it for exit. One of the, if it's necessary and appropriate, one of the best things you can do at that stage is, if you're going to need a financing round, bring in the smartest money you can find, even if the deal terms aren't the best you can find. Maybe somebody's going to knock you down a little bit more on your pre-money, or they're going to jack some warrants on the back end, or, there's going to be other aspects of the deal that maybe are a little less attractive. But if they're smart money, if they've got the connections with the potential exit partners, the relationships with potential exit partners, it can be more than worth it to take a little less attractive deal in order to add that into your company. So that's one thing that can certainly be done. Another thing, and this may be a little more radical, but you can ally yourself with other folks who are potentially attractive as exit partners. And then the third is the old-fashioned hard work, right? You're just going to have to do more homework. You're going to have to attend more trade conferences. You're going to have to maybe make a little bit bigger splash with some publications in order to start to attract attention from folks that maybe aren't a natural fit. And you may have to go a little further afield. It never ceases to amaze me, even though I've been doing this for a decade now with startups, how sometimes exit partners will come out of the blue, right? And they're not somebody you would have expected to necessarily be at the table. And then once you see it, you get it and you go, oh yeah, I see that. So if you're pretty far down the pike and you haven't started to think about those non-traditional exit potentials, that would be another place where you start to throw some effort now.
So by untraditional exit partners, do you mean companies to acquire you that you weren't even thinking of?
Yes, that's exactly what I mean. They're not on your radar scope. And of course, the tough question is, well, how do I think of companies I haven't thought of, right?
Yeah.
But that's where that broader group, whether that's your investors or your advisors or whoever you're surrounding yourself with to help your business, those folks can be accessed for their perspectives on that as well.
Mm-hmm. Those are some good points. So what are some things that exit partners or exit potentials really look for in new opportunities, and what they like to see versus what they don't like to see, what scares them away?
Sure. Clearly they like to see new customers they aren't currently selling something to, because chances are good they can cross-sell them a whole bunch of other stuff, right? So that's a really high value acquisition for them.
Yeah. Okay.
The second would be something that their current customers would like to have that the acquirer can't offer them, right? And that's the classic, let's send more water down the same pipe. Those if you can't do one of those two scenarios, then it's really going to be challenging, I think, to get an acquisition partner excited. In terms of what scares acquisition partners, it somewhat depends on the company culture, but the larger players tend to be quite conservative, right? They're very concerned about things like successor liabilities. So making sure your legal structure is clean, that your cap table is clean, that all the necessary SEC filings were done correctly during your financing. If you have secured creditors, that the UCC filings are in order. Doing background checks on some of your key team members if you've never done them yet. And most startups don't bother with that expense. Do them, right? Pay the $300 to $500 a person or whatever it takes. Because if the acquirer finds out there's a skeleton in somebody's closet during an acquisition process, and it's a surprise to you, it really sucks the air out of the room. And I speak from a particular and painful experience on that note, where I actually got all the way to pass the term sheet, ready to get to a definitive purchase agreement. And something came out of one of the founders' backgrounds that sent the acquirer scurrying from the room.
Oh, no.
It was a surprise.
Are you allowed to share that story?
Probably not in a lot more detail than that. But it was not a deliberate act in this person's past. It was sort of an accidental thing that was nonetheless a violation of a federal regulation. And it was a regulation that was specific to medical devices. And that's really hard to talk your way around.
Yeah, I bet.
Acquirer.
So what, I guess we'll close with, give us maybe three tips that any startup should do when they're thinking about exit strategies. What are the most valuable three things?
Oh, wow.
I think that one is really big. The background checks, that could be huge.
Okay, so top three things to position for startup. As hard as it is for a startup to put themselves in the shoes of a large acquirer, to the extent that you can put yourself in their shoes and ask, not what do I want for my startup, but what do they want for their business? And try to position yourself, take whatever assets you have and arrange them in a way that shines the brightest light on those elements that you think the acquirer wants.
That's that's a good one, because it makes me think of learning how to apply for jobs. You should never have one resume that you hand out. It should always be tailored to the specific company and the specific position that you're applying for, because again, you want to show them why you are the perfect fit for that job. So in this case, is why your product is the perfect fit for their portfolio.
Yeah, that is an excellent analogy. Yeah, you hit the nail right on the head. That's exactly what that is about. I think the second one is try to, and this is hard to do, have the confidence and the fortitude to not salmon chase. And what I mean by that is, if you've ever seen those like National Geographic wildlife movies where the grizzly bear is eating salmon out of the river and they reach in with their giant paw, right, and they swat and they get a salmon in their mouth. Yeah. Well, they don't always get a salmon, right? They come up dry pretty often, but you never see a grizzly bear jump in the river and go, I'm going to get that fish, by golly, right? Yeah. No, he sits there and he waits for the next salmon. And while there aren't as many acquirers in the world as there are salmon, don't feel like you have to, that you have to chase it down, right? Let them come to you a little bit. Obviously there's a dance to be done there, but don't be overeager, because that comes across in a way that sometimes is not perceived positively by the acquirer.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one.
Let's see now if I'm pushed to the wall on a third one.
Well, the third one could be
fresh.
the background check, because I think that's pretty important.
Background check is a good one. Or to maybe generalize it a little further, try to de-surprise your process, right? Try to make sure there's nowhere along the way do surprises come up. Mm-hmm. That also would include, for example, making sure that you have spoken with key customers that acquirer might reach out to. If there are other kind of checkpoints that you think that acquirer might use, that you try to make sure that you're going to get a clean bill of health from those checkpoints.
Yeah. Good. I like it.
Well, thank you.
Well, so Andy, how can people get in touch with you if they're curious to know more about these points, more about what you do, and if they want to work with you?
Sure. The easiest thing, I try not to make myself hard to find. I do maintain a LinkedIn profile that has my contact information on it. Mm-hmm. I also have a website, www.bluemarblemedical, all one word spelled exactly like it sounds, bluemarblemedical.com. And I can be reached at a.cothrel at bluemarblemedical.com or at 317-850-0442. And so, I really enjoy what I do. And so I welcome the opportunity to answer questions that folks might have as a result of hearing this.
Yeah. So guys, you have Andy's contact information. You have his direct phone number. Sometimes people don't like to give out their phone numbers, but he is extremely welcoming. So take that opportunity to reach out to him if you have questions about anything.
But please don't try to sell me things.
Yeah, don't do that. This is for questions. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. And I learned something, and I know other people learned quite a bit. So it's much appreciated.
Thank you, Meghan. I appreciate the invitation. I hope the listeners got some benefit out of this, and I really enjoyed it.
So, hey guys, if you are developing a product or if you're thinking about developing a product, maybe you just have an idea, I have a program for that. So we're going through a beta launch this fall, and you can sign up for that. I have 10 spots at no charge in exchange for some feedback on this program. Also, once that program launches officially in the spring, you'll get to go through that at no charge also. So again, if you have an idea you want to make into a product, that's definitely for you. Check it out. You can text the word invention to the number 44222. So just like you would text someone, except where you put their name, type the number 44222. And then in the text box, the area where you write words, just type in invention. Or you can go to emua-services.com/IIPP. That's IIPP for invention idea to profitable product. Thanks for listening to another episode. Until the next one, Emua.
Mahalo for joining us. If you're new to riding the waves of medical device product development, or if you've been in development for a while already, Inspired by Emua is here to surf with you. Want to be a master of the waves? Text HANG10, that's all one word, HANGTEN, to 44222. We'll send you the most common wipeouts companies make in product development so you can avoid them and reach master wave status. Again, that's HANG10 to 44222. We publish a new episode every Tuesday, so catch us at inspiredbyemua.com. Emua.